The story of the 8.2K event usually begins in scientific papers, old textbooks, or quiet university halls. But for America, the real story began in a place nobody expected, a lonely research station in northern Alaska, close to the frozen edges of the Arctic Ocean. This station, called Cold Ridge Observatory, had been abandoned for nearly 14 years. Snow covered the metal buildings like thick blankets, and winds screamed across the empty land. Nobody visited the area anymore because the roads were dangerous, and the temperature often dropped below minus 40 degrees F. But everything changed the day Dr. Ethan Carter, a climate scientist from Colorado, received a strange, encrypted email. The message simply said, "The truth about the 8.2K event is beneath the ice. Retrieve the data core before they find it." There was no name attached, no signature, no explanation, just coordinates that pointed straight to the abandoned Cold Ridge Observatory. Ethan had worked on climate history for more than 20 years, and he knew the 8.2K event was one of the biggest mysteries on Earth. It happened 8,200 years ago, when the world suddenly became colder. For 2 long centuries, temperatures dropped, crops failed, and ancient humans struggled to survive. Scientists knew it was triggered by melting ice flooding the North Atlantic. But the exact details never completely made sense. There were gaps in the data, holes in the evidence, and rumors, old, quiet rumors, that something had been hidden about this event. Ethan tried to ignore the email for 2 days. He told himself it was a prank. But curiosity slowly ate at him. Finally, he packed his bags, grabbed his cold weather gear, and boarded a small private plane heading north. When Ethan arrived at Cold Ridge, the pilot refused to stay. The wind was too strong, and the place looked cursed: gray skis, ice-locked towers, and a silence so deep it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Ethan watched the plane fly away and disappear into the clouds. He was completely alone. The doors of the observatory were frozen shut, and he had to use a small heat torch to melt the ice. Inside, everything was covered in dust and frost. Broken computers, old papers, and cracked windows made the building feel like a forgotten tomb. Ethan used his flashlight and walked down the long hallway until he reached the main control room. Here, he found something unexpected. The floor was clean. Not perfectly clean, but recently disturbed. Footprints. Someone had been here before him. His heart thumped. Maybe the person who sent the email. He continued deeper into the station. The coordinates he received led to a locked chamber beneath the main floor. The metal door had a sign that read, "Cryo Vault, authorized access only." This room wasn't on any official map of the observatory. Even during his research years, Ethan had never heard of a cryo vault here. That made the mystery even stranger. The lock was digital, but since the station had no power, the screen was dark. Ethan used a portable battery pack to power the keypad. The screen flickered to life, and surprisingly, it didn't ask for a password. It simply displayed one message: "Welcome, Dr. Carter." Ethan froze. How did the system know his name? The door clicked open. Inside the cryovault, blue emergency lights revealed rows of frozen cylinders containing ancient ice cores drilled from Greenland and the Arctic thousands of years ago. These ice cores were time machines. Each layer trapped tiny bubbles of ancient air, pollen, and dust that revealed secrets about Earth's past. But Ethan noticed something else. One ice core was missing from the rack. In its place was a metal box about the size of a shoebox with the label Core 27A, do not reveal. Inside the metal box was a small black device that looked like a futuristic hard drive. The device had a single button and a small holographic panel. Ethan pressed the button gently. The device lit up and projected a glowing map of the North Atlantic region as it existed 8,200 years ago. Ethan watched snowstorms swirl across the map, ocean currents twist, and continents shift slightly. Then he saw something strange, something he had never seen in any scientific model. A giant red pulse appeared in northern Canada, then another in Greenland, then one more near the Labrador Sea. 3 pulses, perfectly timed, perfectly synchronized. After the pulses, the temperature graph on the hologram dropped sharply. Ice expanded rapidly. Oceans changed direction. Weather patterns collapsed. Ethan whispered, "What is this?" Suddenly, the hologram zoomed in on northern Canada. A location appeared, a place he had never heard of. Site 17, Ancient Impact Zone. Impact. Did something hit Earth during the 8.2K event? If that were true, it would rewrite everything Americans knew about ancient climate history, and maybe world history, too. Before Ethan could study the data further, the device shut down and displayed a warning. Unauthorized approach detected. Evacuate immediately. Ethan's skin went cold. The footprints he saw earlier, whoever left them might still be here. He quickly pocketed the device, closed the metal box, and grabbed his backpack. As he headed toward the exit, he heard a sound, soft, slow footsteps coming from the hallway. Not from the entrance, from inside the facility. Ethan turned off his flashlight and pressed his back against the wall. The footsteps grew louder, crunching on broken ice. A shadow appeared on the opposite wall, tall, heavy, and moving with confidence. Ethan held his breath. The shadow stopped right outside the cryovault door. For a moment, the entire world was silent. Then, a deep metallic voice echoed through the hallway. "Dr. Carter, you shouldn't have opened that vault." Ethan felt his blood turn to ice. Someone had known he would come here. Someone powerful. Someone who didn't want the truth of the 8.2K event revealed. And now Ethan was trapped in the middle of the Arctic with a secret the whole world had been misled about for thousands of years. He had only one option left: run. Ethan didn't wait for the metallic voice to speak again. Every part of his body screamed run, and he listened. With the small data core in his backpack, he sprinted down the dark, frozen hallway of Cold Ridge Observatory. His breathing echoed loudly in the empty building, mixing with the distant sound of crunching footsteps behind him. Whoever that person was, they weren't moving slowly anymore. They were chasing him. Ethan reached the main control room and slipped on an icy patch, crashing into an old metal table. Papers scattered everywhere. He scrambled up, grabbed his flashlight, and darted toward the back exit. The door was frozen shut earlier, but he didn't have time to melt the ice now. So he threw his full weight into it. The door didn't budge. He tried again, this time harder. A small crack formed in the ice around the frame. Behind him, the heavy footsteps entered the control room. Ethan didn't look back. He took a deep breath and crashed into the door with all his strength. The ice broke. The door slammed open, and Ethan stumbled outside into the icy wind. Snow whipped across his face as he ran into the open Arctic plain. The sky had grown darker. Snowflakes hit his eyes like tiny needles. The research station, lights flickered behind him, followed by a long silhouette stepping out of the doorway. Ethan pushed himself forward, even though he couldn't feel his fingers anymore. He needed shelter, a hiding place, anything to break the line of sight. The nearest hill wasn't far, but in deep snow, every step felt like dragging cement blocks. The voice called out again, carried by the wind. "Dr. Carter, don't make this harder." Ethan ignored it and kept moving. After nearly 10 minutes of struggling through the snow, he found a shallow, frozen trench carved by melting ice long ago. He dropped into it, pressing himself against the cold ground. The wind howled above him, and the snow piled up quickly, hiding him from view. The footsteps grew faint, then vanished. Ethan waited several long minutes, shaking from fear and cold. When he finally dared to lift his head, the observatory looked ghostly and empty. The figure was nowhere to be seen. He took a shaky breath. He had a very small window of time. He couldn't stay here. He needed to reach civilization. There was an old emergency supply shack about 3 miles east of the station. Ethan remembered reading about it in the original observatory manual. If it wasn't completely destroyed, it might have a satellite communicator, or at least a snowmobile, using the stars for direction, something he learned during fieldwork in Greenland. Ethan started walking. The wind cut through his jacket, and his legs burned from exhaustion. But he forced himself forward, repeating quietly, 3 miles, just 3 miles. After nearly an hour, he finally saw it, a small wooden cabin half buried in snow. Relief washed over him. He hurried to the entrance, brushed away the snow, and pushed open the door. Inside, the cabin was dark, but intact. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old canned food, fuel canisters, and thick emergency blankets. Even better, there was a snowmobile in the corner. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. He pulled out the data core from his backpack and placed it gently on a table. Then he lit a small lantern and examined the device again. It was smooth, cold, and the holographic panel was now dim. He pressed the button lightly. The hologram flickered but didn't activate fully. It displayed a single line of text: energy low, recharge required. He sighed. Of course it needed power, but with the snowmobile's battery, maybe he could create a makeshift charging setup. He was about to open the engine panel when a sharp vibration came from his jacket pocket. His phone. Even though there was no signal this far north, the screen lit up. A message appeared: no number, no sender. You can't run from what you found. Ethan's stomach tightened. Another message appeared a second later: return the device before the world learns the truth. He dropped the phone on the table, heart pounding. Whoever was chasing him had access to secure military networks, or something even more powerful. They were tracking him through his phone. He quickly opened the back panel and removed the battery, letting the screen go dark forever. No more tracking, no more messages. He turned his focus back to the snowmobile. After nearly 30 minutes of work, he managed to pull out the main battery pack. Using a small converter from his field kit, he connected the data core to the battery. The device glowed faintly. Then it powered on. A second hologram appeared this time, a 3D reconstruction of the ancient world. Snow-covered forests, frozen coastlines, and enormous glaciers filled the projection. Ethan watched as the hologram highlighted unusual readings from nearly 9,000 years ago: radioactive particles, strange magnetic disturbances, and shockwave signatures buried deep beneath ancient ice. Shockwaves. The data then zoomed into Site 17, the marked location on ancient Canadian territory. At first, Ethan expected an impact crater, a bowl-shaped hole. But instead, the hologram showed something impossible: a perfect circular depression, more than 10 miles wide, with straight lines, man-made lines, running across the center. It looked like a structure, an ancient structure, buried under thousands of years of ice. Ethan leaned closer. This can't be right. But the device wasn't lying. It was showing something that shouldn't exist, at least not from that time period. Humans 8,000 years ago were simple hunter-gatherers. They didn't build giant circular structures. They didn't create symmetrical patterns large enough to be seen from the sky. And they definitely didn't trigger global climate events. Ethan swallowed, unless the disaster wasn't natural at all. Before he could study the image further, the cabin door suddenly shook violently. Someone was outside. Ethan's blood froze. The door shook again, harder this time. Snow fell from the roof. The lantern flickered. He grabbed the data core and hid behind the snowmobile. The door burst open. A figure stepped inside, covered head to toe in black Arctic gear, snow dripping from their coat. They scanned the room slowly. Ethan held his breath so tightly his chest hurt. The figure walked forward step by step until they stopped right next to the snowmobile. Then, in a low voice, they whispered, "Dr. Carter, you shouldn't have left the station." Ethan's heart pounded. He was trapped again, this time with nowhere to run. Ethan Parker arrived in Maine the next morning. The small airport felt old, quiet, and far away from the rest of the world. The air was cold, and clouds covered the sky like a heavy blanket. As he stepped outside, he felt something strange, a sense of loneliness, as if the land itself was holding its breath. He rented an old pickup truck and drove north along narrow roads surrounded by tall pine forests. The GPS signal kept dropping, and the deeper he went, the more disconnected everything felt. After almost 2 hours, he saw the faded wooden sign, Black Hollow, Est 1839. The sign was cracked and half broken, like nobody had touched it in decades. The town felt frozen in time. Small wooden houses, broken fences, empty stores. No children playing, no dogs barking, just silence and the sound of wind moving through dead leaves. Black Hollow looked like a place the world had forgotten, a town hiding its own fear. Ethan stopped at the only place that looked open, an old diner named Maggie's Place. The neon sign flickered weakly. When he walked in, the bell above the door made a soft ring. Everyone inside turned to look at him. Not little glances, full, suspicious stares. It felt like he had stepped into someone else's secret. A waitress in her 60s approached him. Her name tag read Maggie. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well in years. "You're not from around here," she said softly. "No, ma'am," Ethan replied. "I'm here doing research about events from the past. Old climate patterns, storms, geological shifts." Maggie's eyes narrowed, and she leaned closer. "You're here about the 8.2K event, aren't you?" Ethan froze. He hadn't said a word about it. "How did you—" "Sit down," Maggie interrupted, "and lower your voice." He sat at a corner booth. Maggie poured him a cup of black coffee, her hands shaking slightly. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered. "People in this town don't like outsiders asking questions, especially about that." "But why?" Ethan asked, trying to keep calm. "What happened here?" She looked around. The other customers were still watching him. Maggie leaned in. Black Hollow didn't start as a normal town. It was built on top of something older than us. "What do you mean?" Maggie took a deep breath. "When the glaciers melted thousands of years ago, they left cracks, tunnels, and chambers underground. Most of them collapsed over time, but not all. Some were preserved." Ethan's heart started beating faster. Protected chambers, like a time capsule. Maggie continued. "In 1903, miners searching for iron or dug too deep. They broke into one of those ancient chambers. They found carvings on the walls, strange patterns, symbols no one could read. They also found tools and pottery things that didn't match any known tribe. Ethan's eyes widened. This was exactly the type of discovery that could rewrite history. "What happened to the miners?" he asked. Maggie's voice dropped to a whisper. "They never spoke about what else they saw, and they all died within a year. Every single one." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "How?" he asked. "No one knows. They said the men grew sick, hallucinated, saw things that weren't there. Some said the chamber was cursed. Others said something came out of it." Ethan swallowed hard. "What happened to the chamber?" Maggie's face turned pale. "The town sealed it, buried it under stone and concrete. But heavy floods in the last few years opened cracks again. People started hearing sounds from the ground at night, strange humming. And every time the sound gets stronger, someone disappears." Ethan froze. This wasn't just a climate story. This was turning into something far older and far darker. The man who should not be seen. Before Ethan could ask anything else, Maggie stiffened. Her eyes focused on the diner door. A tall man had entered the diner. Gray beard, long coat, dark eyes. He looked like he knew everything about everyone. "That's Sheriff Dalton," Maggie whispered urgently. "Don't talk to him. He doesn't like questions." But it was too late. The sheriff walked straight toward Ethan. "You're the outsider asking around," he said in a deep voice. "Yes," Ethan replied. "I'm here researching ancient climate change. Nothing dangerous." Sheriff Dalton leaned closer, his face inches from Ethan. "People here don't like outsiders digging into our soil or our past." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Ethan said calmly. The sheriff tapped the table lightly with his finger, but the sound felt threatening. "You leave by morning," Dalton said. "Don't go near the mines. Don't talk to the old families. And don't go into the woods." "Why not the woods?" Ethan asked. The sheriff gave him a slow, cold stare. "Because the ground out there isn't dead, and it remembers things." Then he walked away. Maggie whispered urgently, "You need to leave, now." But Ethan couldn't. He hadn't come this far to walk away. A mysterious map. As Ethan drove toward his motel, he noticed an old man waving at him from a broken porch. The man looked weak but determined. "Hey, you're the researcher, right? Come here." Ethan hesitated, then parked the truck. The old man introduced himself as Caleb Turner, the grandson of one of the original miners from 1903. "I know what you're looking for," Caleb said, "and I know where to find it." "Find what?" Ethan asked. Caleb looked around nervously before pulling a folded piece of parchment from his coat. "This map was passed down in my family. My grandfather drew it. It shows the exact location of the chamber they found." Ethan's heart raced. This was the breakthrough he needed. Caleb pointed at several markings on the map. Old tunnels, sealed entrances, underground pockets. "You go there at night," Caleb said. when the sheriff and his boys aren't watching? Why would the sheriff care? Ethan asked. Caleb leaned in, his voice cracking. Because the chamber holds something that proves the official history of this land is a lie. The sheriff knows. The town elders know. They've been hiding it for generations. Ethan stared at the map, stunned. What exactly is down there? He asked. Caleb's expression grew fearful. I don't know, but I do know this, whatever came before us. It wasn't human. A cold wind moved through the trees behind them, and for the first time since arriving in Black Hollow, Ethan felt like something was watching him. The night felt unusually cold when Ethan stepped out of his motel room. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the streetlights barely lit the road. Black Hollow was silent, as if the town was holding its breath again. Ethan checked the map Caleb gave him. The chamber entrance wasn't near the town. It was deep inside the forest to the east. Sheriff Dalton had warned him not to go there, which only made Ethan more sure he had to. He started the truck and drove down a narrow dirt road. Branches scraped the sides of the vehicle, and the trees grew thicker and taller the deeper he went. After about 20 minutes, the road ended. He stepped out into the darkness. The forest felt alive, not with animals, but with something unseen, something old. Ethan shined his flashlight across the trees. The beam barely reached a few feet before the darkness swallowed it. As he walked deeper, he heard faint, rustling sounds behind him. Footsteps, no. It sounded more like movement inside the ground. He shook off the thought and followed the map carefully. After several minutes, he reached a clearing. In the center was a large stone slab on the ground, covered in moss and dead leaves. It looked ancient, older than any structure he had ever seen. The hidden entrance. Ethan knelt down and brushed away the leaves and mud. Strange patterns were carved into the stone, the same type of symbols he had seen in Maggie's sketches from the miners' journals. He gently pushed on the slab. Nothing happened, but when he stepped back, his foot hit something hollow. He crouched, cleared more dirt, and found a rusted metal handle embedded in the ground. When he pulled it, a wooden trapdoor creaked open, revealing a dark tunnel leading underground. A cold wave of air rushed upward, as if the chamber was exhaling after a very long time. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him this was dangerous, but he had come for answers. He switched on his brighter flashlight and climbed down the ladder. The tunnel walls were wet and covered in old wooden beams. The air smelled like damp earth and age. Every sound he made echoed softly, as if the underground was listening. He walked slowly. After about 50 meters, the tunnel opened into a large chamber, and what he saw made his breath stop. The ancient wall. The chamber was massive, larger than any natural cave. The walls were covered with carvings and symbols, but these weren't random scratches. They looked like a full written language. and in the center, on a huge stone wall, was a mural. Ethan stepped closer, shining his flashlight across the carvings. The mural showed a massive flood sweeping across land, people running, a giant wave swallowing entire villages, and strange tall figures standing on high ground, watching. But the most disturbing part came at the end of the mural. The wave was shown coming from the sky, not the ocean. Ethan frowned. That made no sense. But the carvings were clear, water falling from above the earth, as if the sky had split open. He felt a chill run through him. Was this a depiction of the 8.2K event from the perspective of an ancient civilization? His excitement grew. This mural could be older than any known culture in North America. He took out his phone to record footage. But as soon as he pressed the record button, the screen glitched and shut off. Great, Ethan muttered. The deeper he went, the more he felt a pulsing vibration under his feet, like a heartbeat inside the stone. The first sign of trouble. Ethan approached another part of the chamber. This section had piles of broken pottery and small stone tools. Some of the designs were so advanced that it challenged everything anthropologists believed. He picked up a piece of pottery and noticed small dots burned into the clay. A pattern, a code. He quickly sketched it in his notebook. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the chamber, a distant, low humming. Ethan froze. It didn't sound like machinery or wind. It sounded alive, a deep vibration that made the walls tremble slightly. He turned off his flashlight. The humming continued, slowly growing louder. Ethan stood perfectly still, listening. The sound seemed to be coming from deeper inside the chamber, behind a large stone gateway covered with vines and debris. He stepped closer. The humming stopped instantly. The silence that followed was even worse. Ethan turned to leave when, thud, something echoed behind him. He whipped around. The shadows on the cave wall shifted. Another thud, closer this time. Ethan slowly pointed his flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. But then he noticed something disturbing. The dust on the cave floor wasn't settled. It was moving, shifting slightly, as if something beneath the ground was crawling upward. Ethan backed away slowly. The warning in the dark. He hurried toward the ladder. But before he could climb up, he heard a faint whisper, a voice soft, trembling. Leave. He spun around. Who's there? No answer. Hello? Again silence, except for a faint wind-like sound. Except they were underground. There was no wind. The whisper came again, a little louder. Leave before it wakes. Ethan's heart raced. Was it just his imagination? Echoes, the stress of the situation. He didn't wait to find out. He climbed up the ladder and closed the trapdoor, breathing heavily. But once he stood in the clearing, he realized something was wrong. The forest was completely silent, not even a single insect, and the air felt thicker, as if the ground below him was still humming. He started walking back to the truck. That's when he noticed something on a nearby tree. A fresh carving. It wasn't there before. The same symbol from the ancient chamber. A spiral with 3 lines crossing through it was scratched deep into the bark. Ethan slowly backed away, fear rising in his chest. Someone else had been down there. Or something. The sheriff, ARRIVS. He reached his truck and quickly started the engine. The headlights illuminated 3 figures standing on the road ahead. Sheriff Dalton and 2 deputies. Dalton walked toward Ethan's truck, his eyes cold and furious. "You were warned." Ethan's heart pounded. "Sheriff, listen. There's something down there. Something ancient. This could change everything we know about early civilizations." Dalton slammed his hand on the truck hood. "You don't understand what you're playing with." "Then explain it," Ethan pleaded. "Why is everyone afraid? What happened in that chamber?" Dalton leaned closer, his voice low. "Some doors were never meant to be opened." Ethan knew then. The sheriff wasn't just hiding history. He was afraid of it. Dalton pointed down the road. "Leave this town now. Don't look back." Then he stepped aside. But as Ethan drove away, he saw something in his rearview mirror that made his blood run cold. The sheriff wasn't looking at him. He was staring at the forest, at something moving in the darkness behind the trees. Ethan drove back to his motel with shaking hands. He kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting the sheriff's truck to chase him. Or worse, expecting something from the forest to follow him. When he finally reached the parking lot, he sat there for a moment, breathing heavily. He needed answers. And only one person in this town seemed willing to help him. Caleb Turner. He grabbed the map, stepped out of the truck, and hurried to Caleb's cabin. It was almost midnight, but the old man's lights were still on. Ethan knocked. No response. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. An uneasy feeling crept up Ethan's spine. He pushed the door slightly. It opened with a long, slow creak. "Caleb," he called out. "It's me, Ethan." Silence. Ethan stepped inside. The old man's warning. The cabin looked like someone left in a hurry. Papers were scattered everywhere. Caleb's coat was still hanging near the door. A mug of tea sat on the table, still warm. But Caleb was nowhere. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. He moved through the room, calling Caleb's name again. Then he saw something on the wall smeared with dark brown mud. No, not mud. Symbols. The same spiral, with 3 crossing lines, drawn repeatedly, as if someone was trying to send a desperate message. Ethan felt cold. Suddenly, he heard a soft crack behind him. He spun around. Caleb stood in the doorway, shaking, breathing rapidly. His face pale, as if he had seen death itself. "Caleb," Ethan rushed toward him. "What happened? Are you okay?" Caleb pushed him back with surprising strength. "You shouldn't have gone down there," he said in a trembling voice. "You woke it." I heard it in the woods, that sound, that humming. You know what it is, don't you? Ethan demanded. What really happened in that chamber? Caleb looked at him with hollow eyes. My grandfather told me stories, stories that were never written down, stories no one wanted to believe. He swallowed hard. The miners didn't just find an ancient chamber, they found a survivor. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. A survivor from 8,000 years ago. That's impossible. Caleb shook his head. Not a person, something else. Ethan stared at him. Caleb, what was down there? Caleb whispered the words, so softly Ethan almost didn't hear them. It wasn't human. The first record of the event. Caleb limped toward an old wooden chest and opened it. Inside were yellowed papers, notebooks, and old charcoal drawings. He handed Ethan a brittle journal page. My grandfather drew this before he died. Ethan held the sketch under the lamp. It showed the mural from the chamber. But Caleb's grandfather had drawn another part Ethan hadn't seen. A massive creature, long limbs, hollow eyes, a body thin like a shadow. Surrounding it were humans kneeling in fear. Beneath the drawing were shaky words. It lived through the great fall of water. Ethan felt a chill. You're saying something survived the 8.2K event? He asked. Caleb nodded slowly. They called it the Watcher Beneath. It wasn't a god, but it wasn't like us either. The old people believed it could see what others could not. They thought it warned them before the flood came. Warned them, Ethan repeated. So it helped them. Caleb looked away. No, it chose who lived. Ethan's stomach twisted. Before he could ask more, a loud banging hit the door. Both men jumped. The knock came again, harder, faster. Caleb whispered, terrified. It followed you. Ethan grabbed Caleb's arm. We need to leave. But Caleb shook his head. No, if it wanted me, I'd already be gone. He pointed at the window. It's not that, it's them. Ethan peeked through the curtain. 3 people stood outside, Sheriff Dalton, and 2 men from the diner. The sheriff looked furious. Come out, Parker, he shouted. We need to talk. Caleb hissed, don't trust him. Do I have a choice? Ethan whispered back. Caleb pressed the map into Ethan's hands. There's one more chamber. My grandfather marked it. The big one. The one nobody has ever opened. Ethan stared at him. There's another chamber. Caleb nodded fast. Bigger, deeper. That's where the truth is. That's where it slept. Before Ethan could ask what that meant, the door burst open. Sheriff Dalton stormed inside. The sheriff's truth. What the hell are you doing here? Dalton barked. Ethan stepped forward. Sheriff, listen. Caleb has information about the chamber. Dalton slammed Ethan against the wall. You think this is about an archaeological discovery? Dalton growled. This is about survival. Ethan clenched his teeth. Then explain it. Caleb coughed. Dalton, he knows. The sheriff glared at Ethan, then released him and stepped back. Dalton's voice softened, but his eyes were still dark with fear. Every few decades, people go missing in this town. It always starts the same way, a tremor beneath the ground, a low humming sound, strange carvings appearing on trees. Ethan nodded. I heard the humming. Dalton's face tightened. Then you know it's awake. Ethan swallowed hard. What is it, Sheriff? What's down there? Dalton looked at Caleb, then back at Ethan. The thing your friend's grandfather saw. The thing the ancients wrote about. It didn't die in the flood. It survived. And this town has been keeping it buried for 100 years. Ethan shook his head. So why not tell the government, scientists, anyone? Dalton shouted, because no one would believe us. And if they did, they'd dig deeper and wake it fully. His breath shook. The last time it stirred, 7 people vanished. My own father included. Ethan's heart tightened. So you're trying to stop me because you're afraid I'll wake it. Dalton stepped closer, voice low and shaking. No, I'm stopping you because you already did. The night, FRACTURES. The cabin lights flickered. A deep vibration rolled through the floorboards. Caleb whispered, eyes wide, it's close. Ethan heard it too. A faint humming, not from above, but from beneath the cabin. A slow, rising resonance that made the windows tremble. Dalton panicked. We need to get out now. But before anyone could move, crack, the ground split open in the center of the room. A long black fissure tore across the floor, as if something beneath the earth was pushing upward. Caleb screamed and fell back. Ethan grabbed him just as another tremor hit, throwing the chairs aside. Dalton drew his gun. Though it was obvious a bullet wouldn't help against whatever was coming. The humming grew louder, shaking the walls. Then everything went silent, completely silent. For 5 long seconds, no one moved. Ethan whispered, "Is it over?" Caleb shook his head. "No, it's just listening."